Well, they say a fool's greatest snare is his own words. Case in point, Robert Jeffress, senior pastor at the enormous 12,000-member First Baptist Church in Dallas, Texas. Pastor Jeffress is a vocal proponent of Christian government, Christian America, getting prayer back in schools, you know the type. Last year, after endorsing retired neurosurgeon Ben Carson for president, Pastor Jeffress argued that all Christians should apply a rigorous religious litmus test when choosing a candidate for the highest office in the country. But soon after it became clear that the Carson candidacy was a losing bet, Mr. Jeffress jumped ship and boarded the Trump train. Cornered by his own words, Jeffress had no choice but to lash out at Christians who were then seeking to apply any sort of religious litmus test to the twice-divorced, unapologetic Donald Trump. Just recently, Mr. Jeffress has gone one step further by bluntly stating that Donald Trump would make a far better president than even Jesus Christ himself. Let's roll the tape.
I did enthusiastically support him from the beginning because I believed he was the only one who was electable and could beat Hillary Clinton. But as far as his worldview, Trump's worldview, you know, I was debating an evangelical professor on NPR, and this professor said, "Pastor, don't you want a candidate who embodies the teaching of Jesus and would govern this country according to the principles found in the Sermon on the Mount?" I said, heck no. I would run from that candidate as far as possible because the Sermon on the Mount was not given as a governing principle for this nation. Nowhere is government told to forgive those who wrong it. Nowhere is government commanded to turn the other cheek. Government is to be a strong man to protect its citizens against evildoers.
Pete,
when I'm looking for somebody who's going to deal with ISIS and exterminate ISIS, I don't care about that candidate's tone or vocabulary. I want the meanest, toughest son of a you-know-what I can find.
Okay.
And I believe that's biblical.
All right, so there are at least two takeaways from Jeffress's latest comments. Number one, we could basically say that politicians who seek to apply Christ's commands while in office are apparently far more dangerous, according to Pastor Jeffress, than belligerent strongmen with unharnessed power. The second observation that we can take away from Jeffress's comments is that politicians should restrain and refrain themselves from applying expressly Christian principles and teachings while serving in government. Put simply, if you take Jeffress's logic to the extreme conclusion, Jeffress is suggesting that Christian politicians should abandon their New Testaments when it comes to conducting political business. This is a big oops on the part of Pastor Jeffress because according to him and others of his ilk, America was founded as a quote-unquote Christian nation. They believe that America is blessed because it has promoted Christian ideals and principles. Jeffress also claims that America is best served by outspoken Christians serving in public office. So how bizarre then that it is that Jeffress would seek to prevent Jesus or anyone that looks like him from getting anywhere near the centers of power in Washington. How ridiculous, but also how revealing. Very reminiscent, in fact, of the story of Jesus as he is being led to his death. He is standing before Pilate and before an angry Jewish mob, and the mob is offered two different men. They're offered Jesus, who can be released, Jesus Christ, who can be released from his chains, or they can release another man, and that other man's name was Barabbas. Jesus Barabbas, according to the ancient manuscripts. This was another Jesus, and he was a strong man. He was a man who used the sword to murder, and he used the sword to exact justice. Unlike the quote-unquote weak Jesus Christ, who did not rely upon violence, but instead told his followers to turn the other cheek. Jeffress is clamoring for the strong man Barabbas and rejecting the person of Jesus Christ.
I want the meanest, toughest son of a you-know-what I can find, and I believe that's biblical.
According to Jeffress, America is a Christian nation. According to Jeffress, America was founded as a Christian nation, and America should promote Christian ideals and beliefs. There's just one major exception. Don't let Jesus or anyone like him near the centers of power in Washington. A fool is always ensnared by his own mouth. False teachers expose themselves in full view today without ever having to try to hide it. This is sadly just one of many such examples. And while Pastor Jeffress is correct when he states that the Sermon on the Mount was not given as a governing principle for this nation, it does provide the governing principles for the kingdom of God, a kingdom that Jeffress seems to be silent on. That Jeffress could elevate any earthly form of government above the government of God in any context is simply astonishing given his role. As a follower of Christ myself and as a believer in the kingdom of God, my enemies are not homosexuals. My enemies are not those who have had abortions. My enemies are not transsexuals. Instead, my enemies, just like Jesus, are religious people who cling to a form of godliness and yet deny the power thereof, and that promote the kingdoms of this world above and beyond the kingdom of God, which we have been called to herald as Christians. And that's just something to think about.